This is our last day in our case against Donald Trump for persistent and repeated fraud, illegality. This case has never been about politics or personal vendetta or about name calling. This case is about the facts and the law. And Mr. Donald Trump violated the law. And as you know, the judge has already found that he, in fact, violated the law for repeated fraud over a period of years. And so I want everyone to know that the personal attacks really don't bother me. The fact is that this trial has shown, and we have produced evidence about the scope, the scale, the depth, the breadth of the illegality, the fraud that impersonally enriched Donald Trump and his family. I want to thank the judge. I want to thank my team. I even want to thank opposing counsel. But at the end of the day, the point is simple. No matter how powerful you are, no matter how rich you are, that no one is above the law and that the law applies to all of us equally and fairly. I trust that justice will be done, and I'm confident in that. And I'm extremely proud of the case that we put on.
After 11 weeks and 44 days, closing arguments were given. Donald Trump gave a bizarre closing statement himself, but then just stormed out. But after the theatrics and the ranting and raving and whining of Donald Trump and his lawyers was done, the Attorney General lawyers got to speak, and they got to talk about the facts and evidence. So Assistant Attorney General Kevin Wallace kicked off the closing arguments. Adam Klasfeld was there. And Kevin Wallace for the New York Attorney General's office started with a Watergate reference. Quote, "What did the defendants know, and when did they know it?" Well, as the New York Attorney General prosecutor said, you certainly didn't hear any evidence that the numbers the defendants were using on their financials were accurate. You never heard Donald Trump and his lawyers say that these numbers were true and correct. They gave you numerous excuses why they weren't true and correct, but is accurate data. They blamed the accounting firm Meiselas. They said when Donald Trump inflated the valuations, it was a mistake. They tried to say that these were just subjective valuation methodologies, when in fact the issue were the inputs, the fraudulent data that were input into subjective valuation methodology. So no matter what valuation methodology you use to try to conform these financials to GAAP, if you use different models, sure, you could use different models, but what you can't do is say that Mar-a-Lago, which is a commercial property where there is an easement that states that the property will forever be encumbered to be used as a club, and that you, the Trump organization, have devalued the property of Mar-a-Lago by placing encumbrances on it as a commercial club, you then can't say this is actually a residential property that is valued at $300, $400 million, or even lie, as you did during these proceedings, and claim that the valuation of Mar-a-Lago is actually 100 to 150 times greater than the valuation that you gave to the property, Trump organization, not Judge Engoron. It was the Trump organization that valued Mar-a-Lago at under $27 million precisely because they wanted to pay less property taxes on it. And sure, if that's what you want to do, then just be consistent about it. You then can't lie and say it's actually a residential property to make the valuation higher. That's called fraud. Similarly, you can't say that your buildings are fully occupied and use the highest cost per square footage to come up with the highest leasing amounts for a fully occupied building when the building is not fully occupied and it's rent controlled. That is fraud. You can't say that your triplex is 30,000 square feet when it's actually 10,000 square feet to inflate the valuation by hundreds of millions of dollars on the property. When you take that data and you input it on any subjective valuation methodology, that is fraud. Your data is fraudulent. And sure, we could go back to what Alina Habba says, quote, "We're all human beings, and Donald Trump just did his best." You can't harm Donald Trump for just his human error. That's the argument that Alina Habba made. Alina Habba then says that why would Donald Trump hire one of the largest accounting firms, Meiselas, if he's going to commit fraud? I'd ask the question, why did Meiselas insist that they were the ones who were not responsible for the collating, for the aggregation of the underlying data, that Trump, that the co-signers of the trustee, Eric and Don Jr., they were fully responsible for the accuracy of the data, not Meiselas. That's what Meiselas said. You could go back, whether it's Enron, Bernie Madoff. Yes, people who commit fraud use large accounting firms and provide them with fraudulent data. But Alina Habba's other point is, explain to me, if you're trying to commit fraud, why would you put it in writing to a real estate agent? Excuse me, can you tell me how big this apartment is? Because you're committing fraud. Because you are lying to the real estate agent. That is why. And so as the New York Attorney General lawyers continued with their, thought a very powerful closing argument, again, unlike Trump's lawyers, they stuck to the facts. And there were some moments that I thought were definitely passion was injected into their closing arguments. The New York Attorney General lawyer Kevin Wallace described Trump's efforts to shift the blame to the accounting firm Meiselas as one of the defense's undead arguments, to which Donald Trump's lawyer Christopher Kise furiously objected after Wallace turned to what he calls the defense's murderer's row of experts. All of these loser experts who lied one after another. And then Christopher Kise says, to use that caustic term, that is outrageous, Donald Trump's lawyers. That's outrageous behavior by the New York Attorney General's lawyer. And Judge Engoron said, I take it to be poetic license, not literal. And then Engoron looked at the New York Attorney General lawyer and said, are you actually accusing the defense experts of being murderers? To which Kevin Wallace deadpanned this from the New York Attorney General's office, looked at the judge and said, no, I was accusing them of being the 1927 Yankees, to which the whole room burst in laughter. Then you had the other Attorney General lawyer, Andrew Amir, took over breaking down the evidence and focused on things like, here's what Donald Trump's Chief Operating Officer, Jeff McConney, said. Then Engoron asked, how do you think ex-Trump organization's Chief Operating Officer, Jeff McConney, knew about the rent-stabilized units? Andrew Amir, the New York Attorney General lawyer, said, because he's not an idiot, Judge, to which everybody burst out in laughter. And McConney actually testified that he had copies of these things, like the deed restricting the use of Mar-a-Lago. This was a document case. You didn't need all of these witnesses, although the witnesses certainly added flavor to the documents, but you could see the fraud in the documents. That's why Judge Engoron granted summary judgment against Donald Trump from the outset, because there was no documents and data that rebut the fact that there was fraud in the documents. And I know Alina Habba finds it very difficult to understand how fraud can exist in documents, but that's how it works. It's either spoken fraud or document fraud. It has to happen somewhere. It doesn't just manifest in MAGA ether. It exists somewhere on paper. You also had the Attorney General lawyers display a transcript from McConney's testimony about Mar-a-Lago. And why was it not valued as a private club? Answer, I don't remember off the top of my head. New York Attorney General lawyer said, really, Your Honor? It's not like that was a shock question. It was asked by McConney's own lawyer, one of the Trump lawyers. The New York Attorney General lawyers said, let's take a look at Eric Trump's testimony. He denied knowledge of his father's financial statement, but let's take a look at the contemporaneous documents showing that Eric signed off on all of these things. There's no question that Eric Trump received the emails, knew what McConney was referring to, and knew about these financials. He's on these records. Speaking of denials, as Adam Klasfeld points out, the Attorney General's lawyer says, and Eric Trump was forced to recant and displayed the transcript. Question, so did you know about your father's annual financial statement as of August 2013? Didn't you? Eric, it appears that way, yes. And that is how they did it, as in a data-driven way. And one of the things, though, that the judge said at the end is that he hoped that there would be a final ruling before January 31st. We've always predicted that here at the MeidasTouch Network, that we thought that you'd have a final verdict by Judge Engoron on or before February 1st is what we said. So with the E. Jean Carroll defamation case now going to trial in the next few days on the issue of damages, with Judge Engoron issuing a ruling on damages in the New York Attorney General civil fraud case, I think by February 1, we will have Donald Trump hit with somewhere between $250 million to $1 billion in damages. You heard that right. $250 million to $1 billion in damages. And Ben, how do you get at these numbers? Well, the New York Attorney General is requesting $370 million as disgorgement damages, return of this money that was obtained by Trump through fraud and deceit. But also that does include interest. 9% per year compounded adds about $200 million to that amount. And you get quickly in the $500 million range in damages, plus the E. Jean Carroll verdict, which I think will be anywhere between $10 to $15 million on the low end. And there could be a runaway jury, and I could see $100 million plus Giuliani style verdict as well. We know Judge Engoron has already ruled to dissolve the Trump Organization in a prior order. That ruling is now stayed pending a final resolution of everything else that was to be decided at trial, which was the disgorgement amount, as well as the injunctive relief being sought by the New York Attorney General's office to stop Trump from ever doing real estate for the rest of his life in New York, and to stop Don Jr. and Eric for a 5-year period from doing real estate in the state of New York. That's your update, but I wanted you to hear what a real closing argument was like as compared to Donald Trump and his lawyers. Thanks for watching. Hit subscribe. We're on our way to 2 million subscribers thanks to your support. And check us out as well at patreon.com/MeidasTouch, patreon.com/MeidasTouch. Make sure you spell it right. MEIDASTOUCH. And have a great day.
Hey Meidas Mighty, love this report? Continue the conversation by following us on Instagram @MeidasTouch to keep up with the most important news of the day. What are you waiting for? Follow us now.